Hello everybody, this is ManuS, and welcome to another Legends of Runeterra patch review. I'm going to talk about the latest patch notes, which are pretty short, and as a bonus we're also going to talk about all the leaked KDA cards. There's like a promo series of a couple of single cards for a few regions. I'm not sure if there will be more cards for more regions coming later or at the same time and they haven't all been leaked, but I'll cover all the ones that we have so far. And yeah, if there's more in the future, I'll obviously let you know as well. Before we dive right in, you know the drill. Hit the subscribe button down below to not miss out on future content. And now let's take a look. So first off, we have the patch notes. Patch notes are pretty short. They're mentioning basically they're implementing a Lee Sin change and a Make It Rain change to take down Bilgewater's general strength a bit before patch 1.14 will be one of their larger mid-expansion balance updates that will focus mostly on small improvements to several foundations, set champions, as well as some nerfs aimed at ensuring metagame health in the lead up to the first seasonal tournament in December. So that's going to be the interesting patch. This one is surprisingly short. It's basically shorter than some of the release patches that weren't even balance patches but had 2 to 3 balance changes in the patch regardless. So yeah, first off we have the announced change to Lee Sin, and I actually changed him exactly as I was considering they might. They made him a 5-cost champion and in turn gave him back one of his health points. So he's a 5-cost 3/5 now as opposed to a 4-cost 3/4 or a 6-cost 3/6 as in the beginning. They didn't change anything else. I feel like maybe it would have made sense to increase the level up condition by 1 or something to further nudge him down a bit, because I fear that maybe this change is not gonna do enough in the end. I think the deck will be at the very least be a tier 2 deck still, possibly still a less good tier 1 deck. I think it will be more pronounced in its strengths and weaknesses. Lee Sin becoming more expensive primarily will matter probably when you're under pressure, so against aggressive decks, which were already the toughest matchups for Lee, although depending on how games went and so on, they weren't horrible, but they were unfavorable. And now with Lee coming down a turn later, this might be the breaking point where they become more pronounced unfavorable, more pronounced bad matchups, while I feel like the profitable matchups, the good matchups for Lee Sin actually don't change much and will mostly remain the same, I think. In fact, the fact that he is 5 health now has its own benefits. If they would have just made him 5 without giving him stats, it would have been a different story, but the 5th health point actually does a reasonable bunch on its own. So yeah, I also like this change because we had 0 5-cost champions and 3 4-cost champions, giving a bit more diversity to like the champion spread in Ionia, which is neat. So yeah, all in all, it's a subtle nerf that keeps the card fully intact in terms of its functionality, while making it slower and sort of less reliable in terms of relying on it to like take over the board for you, which certainly was one of the more problematic things about him in the decks, that he wasn't just your win condition, he was also like your board control tool. He was your threat and your board control tool all in one, which is kind of a big deal. So yeah, this certainly is an interesting way of approaching it. It will certainly rebalance the deck. The interesting question is, will it rebalance it enough to not be obnoxious anymore? It is certainly worse than before, but it's probably a deck that will still stick around and you can still keep playing if you have been playing it before and like it. And as usual, there might be more unforeseen ripple effects like we've had in the past, and the impact of this comparatively small change will be bigger than it seems right now, but my guess for now would be the deck remains viable and good, although less universally good at what it does, and will be losing its bad matchups a lot more, while its good matchups won't be affected too much. And the other change is another pretty interesting one, and we've talked about it on my stream. when the information came out that Steve mentioned a Make It Rain change on Alan's stream. And my guess was that they most likely would make it just cost 3 because it's highly cost efficient at 2, and they probably want to like not completely redesign or change the identity of the card, rather make it less efficient. And it's like while it was pushed on 2, it's slightly on the like weaker end as a 3-cost spell, but not like a bad 3-cost spell. So it will still see some play and will still be sort of within a power level range of being a consideration in Constructed, but it will not be an auto inclusion anymore. It will not be an auto 3-off in any Bilgewater deck, basically. Which is kind of what they're going for, and it also makes it a lot less effective and swingy. You can still play it on turn 2, like before in reactive decks, for example, but it obviously costs you that 1 spell mana that you had before, which might come back to bite you later and stuff like that. So all in all, I like this change. The card was quite obnoxious for a lot of stuff in a lot of spots, especially more fragile early game decks, where Make It Rain often presented just like a 2-for-1 that also gained you mana, because you would kill like their 1 and their 2 or with 1 card and 2 mana, where they spend 3 mana and 2 cards, which is pretty absurd. And then the amplification of kegs and stuff, really pushing it over the top, especially at 2. Now it's going to be a lot harder to go, for example, like you can't easily go turn 2 deckhand plus Make It Rain anymore if you also made a play on 1 or 2 on turn 2. Which is also pretty relevant, meaning it's harder to set up keg plus Make It Rain in the same turn and stuff like that. So yeah, the implications are fairly big here, but I mean, they wanted to take down Bilgewater a notch for a while. People have been begging for it too, and I think this is a pretty sensible change and gonna create some interesting changes in the metagame. It will open up some room to breathe for more fragile early game units that are currently being heavily punished, and take away some of the oppressive board control, like early to mid game board control tools in like Make It Rain, Twisted Fate type decks and stuff like that. So yeah, otherwise that's it really for the patch. Some expedition changes, some minor bug fixing stuff. Not even a lot on that frontier, basically. It's a super short patch. But yeah, 2 kind of big changes, although the Lee Sin change still seems like a fairly temperate one to me compared to the Make It Rain. But we'll see how it plays. So yeah, how do you feel about those 2 changes? And what do you think will their impact be and so on? Let me know in the comments down below. Curious to see how other people feel about it. All in all, I'm pretty happy with both changes, although I feel like maybe Lee Sin might lead another smaller future tweak, like I said, maybe putting the level up condition to 9 or something to make him a little harder to get to the point where he really takes over. Because it's not just the killing potential from leveled up Lee Sin, it's also just the fact that from there on his board control potential dials up to 11. He's really hard to kill, because basically if he gets in combat on offense, there's no way killing him, because he just protects himself with Dragon Rage. He generates card advantage and or tempo. He pressures you at the same time. It's just really, really powerful. You don't even need like to OTK your opponent. You can just keep the board under control enough while chip-shotting them down over a couple turns. And delaying that point a bit further might be necessary over as well. Anyway, let's dive into the spoilers. Alright, so first off we have Give It All. Give It All, it's an 8-cost PNZ card. Raise all allies' power and health to the highest power and health among allies. Grant all allies allied keywords. I don't know, card seems pretty memey. 8-cost slow spell is really slow, really clunky. It also requires quite a big board to even be worth it, so like probably 3+ units at the very least. At least one of the units needs to be fairly sizable. There needs to be potential like good enough keywords and stuff. Honestly, I don't think this card is playable really especially in the region, like it's also in a really awkward region in PNZ. That seems pretty useless to me, honestly. Maybe some cute meme stuff you can do, but I don't think the card is remotely likely to show up in any good competitive deck, if you ask me. Next we have Go Get It. It's a 5-cost fast spell, Ionia. You recall an ally to summon an exact ephemeral copy in its place and reduce its cost to 0 this round. This is actually a kind of a cool and interesting card. First of all, it creates an exact copy, not just stats, so you get the full unit. So basically for 5 mana, it saves your unit. While replacing it, it probably works the same way as Shadow Shift does, so it probably kind of switches plays with all the targets. Like for example, if you attack with a Lee Sin, put a Dragon Kick on the stack and then Go Get It the Lee Sin, I would assume the ephemeral Lee Sin that you get still Dragon Kicks in place of your normal, of your actual Lee Sin, but I'm not 100% sure. And then the fact that it reduces the cost of the unit you return to 0 means the more expensive the champion is you save with this, the more you get out of it. Like now with the nerfed Lee costing 5, basically using this on a Lee Sin means it effectively costs 0 to save your Lee Sin. Effectively you invest 5 mana to create an ephemeral copy of a unit, because you get the mana of the unit you're returning back. So technically it would cost you 10 mana because it's 5 for Go Get It and 5 for Lee Sin to replay Lee Sin, but because Lee Sin is discounted to 0, you're literally just paying 5 mana for a fast speed way of saving your Lee while still maintaining a Lee in play to do whatever you were doing. So the thing is, it's still kind of narrow. Like for example, what it can do is like it can save a silence Lee, but then the ephemeral copy is also silenced, so it's not that great. And if it works like Shadow Shift, which it probably does, it means it also doesn't really counter the stuff that you save your champion from and stuff like that. So it's kind of like a 5 mana deny-like card that only works with stuff that targets your units and so on. So yeah, I don't know. But this is a card that at least is interesting in some way and could see some use here and there, but it's also not that great of a card. But I think that's kind of the point of these cards, that they are more for like the promo event type stuff and less for like being super impactful in the game, especially on a competitive level, which is probably a good approach, honestly. You don't want to have these like random releases that completely throw things off, especially when you just had a major release and trying to balance the rest of the stuff. Next we have Out of the Way. That's the Targon card. It's a 5-cost slow spell, which already doesn't bode that well for its competitiveness. And for the rest of the game, allied buffs except barrier are permanent and you draw a card. Doesn't seem very hot. 5 mana for basically cycling and having no board impact, and then some very like fringe and situational benefits. Can't think of anything where this would be great, but maybe there's some interesting like tier 2, tier 3 way of doing stuff with this, but once again, probably more of a meme than anything. 5-cost slow spells with no board impact and situational questionable value don't seem very hot usually in Constructed. And then we have Feel the Rush. That's kind of a big deal in a way and quite interesting. It's comparable to War Mother's Call in sort of different ways. It's also in the same region, so it is Freljord. I'm not sure how I feel about the cards don't really telegraphing their region more by, for example, the card being bluish other than the card art. So I think they should have probably done that to make the cards clearer, aligned with the region they are in, making the text box the region color and stuff. It's kind of weird. This card screams Ionia at you and then you realize it's actually a Freljord card. You summon 2 different random champions from your hand and deck, and raise their stats up to 10-10. Interesting question is it one from your hand and one from your deck? The way it reads, it's probably just randomly pulling from hand and deck, or if you have 0 champions in hand, just pulling both from the deck. And with that reading, the card's actually pretty good. It's basically a War Mothers that front loads and further improves the quality of the first 2 War Mothers triggers at the cost of not getting any further War Mother triggers. It also allows you to get multiple copies of champions in play. If you already have, say, a Trundle in play, you get a 10-10 Trundle and a 10-10 Tryndamere. And especially the 10-10 Tryndamere turning into a 11-11 Tryndamere once it dies is kind of a big deal. So this might actually just be straight up a better War Mothers in most cases. Especially because getting 2 10-10 champions, like a 10-10 Trundle and a 10-10 Tryndamere, is so much better than the average value of a War Mothers over 2 turns. And especially given the fact that the turn you play this, the game often just ends, while with War Mothers it doesn't. So yeah, this card is pretty impressive, and War Mothers control will probably turn into Feel the Rush control. But I don't know, maybe there's some benefit to running like 2 Feel the Rush and 1 War Mothers in decks that before ran 3 more War Mothers. The other benefit of Feel the Rush over War Mothers is you don't need to build your deck. Like you don't need to warp your deck anymore to accommodate War Mothers. Like now you can suddenly play Hapless Aristocrat against aggro if you want to in your War Mothers, because you don't run War Mothers anymore. You run Feel the Rush. Also, suddenly Withing Stone doesn't become a potential liability anymore and stuff like that. So yeah, this card seems insane and kind of a big buff to War Mothers probably. And I would expect probably 2 to 3 Feel the Rush control to be the new norm, and War Mothers kind of being faded out, which is a bit crazy to me, honestly, that they would print a card that seems more or less notably better than War Mothers, kind of just taking over the role from War Mothers and banishing War Mothers to the bench in a weird way. But the more I think about it and the more I look at it, that's what it seems like to me, and it's a pretty notable upgrade that frees up a lot of flexibility in how you can build the deck, especially against more aggressive stuff and in general. So you also need to actually play less random units to make your War Mothers good enough, because suddenly all you need is your Trundles and your Tryndameres, and you just pull a Trundle and a Tryndamere and off you go. So yeah, gonna probably, besides replacing War Mothers, also notably probably improve the streamlining and consistency and stuff of these types of decks, because now you don't need to warp your deck in so many ways compared to before, and lean more into controlling the game and staying alive until you feel the rush and win. So yeah, kind of a big deal. Expect this to be even better and more dominant than right now. To be fair, I've had mixed feelings about War Mothers currently, and especially on ladder it seems very hit or miss. But I think Feel the Rush might actually change that notably. But we will see. I think the cards will release with the patch tomorrow, but I'm not 100% sure. But that's what it's read like from what I've seen. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments down below. But yeah, how do you feel about these cards, especially Feel the Rush? We got one more. Actually, before I forget, almost forgot. Another one that's actually quite appealing and another potential addition to these War Mothers or Feel the Rush type control decks. It's Go Hard. It's a 1 mana slow spell that drains 1 and shuffles 2 copies of Go Hard into your deck. Once you've cast it 3 times, you transform all copies of it everywhere into Pack Your Bags. And Pack Your Bags is 1 mana, deal 5 to all enemies and the enemy nexus, and then you transform all copies of Pack Your Bags back to Go Hard. The awkward thing is that it kind of dilutes your deck, but it gives you some random like high roll potential and answers that you otherwise wouldn't have access to in the later game. And also there are matchups where like drain 1 is pretty big and matchups where it isn't that great, you might just not play the first copy since you don't have to, and suddenly it's not that big of a deal. The fact that it's slow and not fast is quite relevant, but the fact that it costs 1 so you can actually use it on aggro's 1-drops is really big. It only works on units, just like Valfeast, but yeah, I expect this to also be a potentially pretty big addition to Feel the Rush control decks. They probably gonna replace their horrors with Pack Your Bags. I think that's more or less a fairly straight upgrade in the deck, giving you answers to 1-drops, being more mana efficient and so on, while pinging phase doesn't matter too much in War Mothers. So yeah, kind of impressive that the 2 cards that are best from these both go into the same deck, which is already considered a tier 1 deck, and they're both notable upgrades to the deck. So yeah, things gonna be wild probably. I know what I'll probably be banning in future tournaments for now. But yeah, how do you feel about these cards? I certainly don't like the poor balancing of the cards. Like some of them, like most of them seem actually mediocre to useless, while 1 or 2 of them seem like potential constructed staples and deck makers going forward. And that is something I'm not too pleased by, but we'll see how it pans out. But yeah, War Mothers just felt the rush and got a whole lot better. Let me know in the comments what you think. This seems pretty big to me for a couple of random promos for a music-related event. But yeah, that's it again for this time. You know the drill. If you enjoy the content, hit the like button, subscribe, turn on notification icon to not miss out on future content, and so on and so forth. And check the description for any further information. I'm your host ManuS. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.